Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 149 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. I'm joined, as always, by the co-host, Matt Feuerstein. Someone make a compilation of the number of times I almost screw up the intro that I say every time. Matt, maybe I'm discombobulated because this is a rare for us Monday night recording, which we rarely ever do.
Welcome to Monday night recording. Sorry. I apologize to everyone.
Yeah, I know this is going to throw off all our listeners. It's going to ruin their whole week. You know, they never know what to expect from us. The thing about our show, Matt, is, any of our listeners are hard won because we don't do any of the niceties of other podcasts. We don't come out every week. We don't pick a consistent day. We don't have a theme song. We don't promote the show. We don't do anything. We're like the old Observer in the mail where it's like we got the small type, no pictures, no color. You got to earn it. You got to dig in to get the meat off of these bones.
Another new catchphrase. Through the years, we don't do anything.
We don't try.
And that's why the deep vein thrombosos love us.
Yeah.
Or at least remember that we exist. The deep vein thrombosos remember that we exist, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, there's more than ever expected. I'm not saying we're huge, but more than we deserve, quite frankly. But
agreed. We
will try and earn it for this episode when we cover our show for tonight, which is Domination. And Domination took place June 9th, 2007 at the Pennsylvania National Guard Armory in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in front of a reported crowd of 675 fans.
Let me ask you something. If ROH had a show called Domination, do you think that would lead anyone to believe that this show would feature a special appearance by one Ron Simmons? Or maybe the soon-to-be Ring of Honor star D'Lo Brown? Or maybe Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? Do you think that anyone thought that when they heard that ROH had a DVD out called Domination?
No, just Mark Henry.
Okay.
But no,
PG-13. PG-13.
That's a good pull.
I'm gonna say one more member. Crush. Was he still alive in 2007? I don't even remember.
Yeah, because I have to admit, like, Owen Hart came up with then very quick. I was like, well, Owen Hart couldn't have been there in 2007. He couldn't have been at any Ring of Honor show.
Oh no. Crush died 2 months after this show. Sorry, everybody, but he could have been on the show. And they could have at least had a reason for calling the show Domination. That's all I'm saying.
So this would have been like an Ultimate Warrior WWE Hall of Fame situation. It would have been like, man, yes, he's right at the top, a real full circle getting shown love moment right before the end. And, it was denied, quite frankly, ROH's biggest crime. But we'll go to there's one note on the show from The Observer where Dave wrote that for this show, ROH eliminated one set of bleachers that they usually use because they wanted the look of a sellout for pay-per-view. What I would say is, for people that are going, well, this wasn't a pay-per-view, and I would say you are correct, sir, except that is kind of the story of the show, is one match on this show was taped for the next ROH, the second ever ROH pay-per-view, but because of that, they decided to put that match not just on the pay-per-view, but on the DVD version of that pay-per-view, which means it is not on this DVD, which means there's kind of a hole in the show because this show had a Nigel McGuinness Bryan Danielson match, a very well-received one.
Okay, and when you say very well-received, you're underplaying it a little bit. Because it's one of the best matches in Ring of Honor history. I had it on my top 10 list of best Bryan Danielson matches of all time. We'll talk about it more, obviously, in a couple shows, but that's something.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, as a result, I believe this is the shortest show up to this point in ROH history, the shortest show, I think, in Through the Years history, because I think this DVD was 2 hours and 19 minutes, and usually Ring of Honor shows, around 3 hours, give or take 10 or 15 minutes. And so, yeah, they just did not, tape something extra for this DVD. They didn't, add like a bonus match or anything. It was just, There's no Daniel, but it pays off if you bought the DVD 2 shows from now, because that if you bought the DVD version of Driven, you got 2 Danielson matches, because you got the one they took off this show and the one they taped on that show, which was him versus Kenta. So you kind of got like a. But I have to imagine that this show probably did not sell great as a result. But we will get into the quality of this because
but also I do want to mention there's a little more to that story of the Danielson and McGuinness match, because I went to this show and they faked us out. Like, this was a surprise. Like, I forget exactly what had happened, but I think that McGuinness. Because I was trying to find like what exactly was advertised, but I do remember at the beginning of the show they made like an announcement that like McGuinness and Danielson were off the show. Like that's something that I pretty starkly remember. I just don't remember what the original advertised lineup was.
So none of this makes the DVD, but I believe the original card was Danielson versus Seidel was booked, and it was supposed to be Nigel McGuinness versus a mystery opponent.
Gotcha, yeah.
At the start of the show, they have Bobby, again, this doesn't make the DVD, they have Bobby Cruz come out and announce that due to injury, Bryan Danielson won't be able to make the show, but, we will have a replacement that, we guarantee you will not be disappointed with, or something like, you won't be disappointed with the show, something to that effect. And then, of course, they fake everyone out when it's time for Nigel's, mystery opponent. They announced this match is being taped for the next pay-per-view, and boom, here comes Bryan Danielson. Everyone's happy. So
it certainly helped make the crowd go absolutely bonkers. But again, we'll talk about that at a later date.
Yeah, and I believe I don't understand. I mean, I didn't get a great explanation. I think I read somewhere, we might get into this on the notes for the pay-per-view and 2 shows, where I think the explanation ROH gave to like Torch or something for doing it this way was just like, we wanted to reward Philly, which was our home base, with, getting to be part of a pay-per-view, getting something special. So they kind of jerry-rigged things in this weird way to have one match tape there and and I imagine, like you were kind of alluding to, the idea of them doing the surprise was probably, I would guess, just to try and juice the crowd up even more. This idea of like, oh shit, like a few minutes ago we didn't even know we were getting this, and now we're getting taped for pay-per-view, and we've got Danielson is not hurt. So, but if you're getting the 2-hour and 19-minute DVD, what you got to open was, as we usually do in these shows, we open with Rebecca Bayless backstage. She's here to tell us how ROH taped its first pay-per-view last month, and it's going to air next month. So on tonight's show, we're going to hear what some of the ROH superstars have to say about being on pay-per-view. I'll have more to say about that later, but it's kind of weird.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
No, I want to hear what you got to say first.
I was just going to say, it's weird that, like, by the time this DVD came out, the pay-per-view would probably be airing already, because, I mean, the pay-per-view started to air at various times in July, depending on what your local provider was. This show was taped on June 9th, so it was probably coming out probably in early July. So maybe the timing then, maybe I'm being too hard. Maybe the timing was good on it.
Well, I think that if this happened today, there'd be like a whole discourse about ROH using, like, Rebecca Bayless using the word ROH superstars instead of wrestler. People would be like, "Oh, really? You're doing this WWE crap?" Like, I just feel like this would be like a whole thing if it came out now. Like, even I reacted to it like that way, like watching it here. I was like, "Really, superstars?" But like at the time, I'm sure I did not bat an eye at it. So I think it's just kind of funny to think about it in the context of today.
Matt, we're all members of the ROH universe, but and that universe is sparse these days. But next up, we have a match we did not get on DVD. We did get some dark matches. We had the dark ROH top of the class trophy match for the title.
The derp trophy.
The derp trophy. It was a 4 corners match. Pele Primo successfully defended his trophy when he defeated Alex Payne, Mitch Franklin, and Rhett Titus. And I did like this PW Insider live report from a man named Josh High. I hope his last name really was H-I-G-H. And he wrote this about the match. He wrote, "The first do or die attraction was the 4-way fray for the top of the class trophy. Mitch Franklin, Sugarfoot Alex Payne, the sexiest man alive, Rhett Titus, and trophy holder Pele Primo. The crowd clearly didn't realize it was elimination. There was an audible hush when Mitch Franklin made Sugarfoot tap with a hold similar to an anaconda vice. Mitch Franklin eventually got the victory roll on Rhett Titus, who was playing the gimmick very well, including personal mirror and feathered and sequined robe. Pele Primo got got the final pinfall on Franklin after a stunner, and then proceeded to accidentally break his trophy. Good match. It's just weird to see wrestlers that small. I just like that 1-2 punch of Pele accidentally broke the trophy, and this guy was like, it's weird seeing small wrestlers. Well, welcome to the world of indie wrestling.
Yes, but although Pele and Mitch Franklin are short
yes.
for indie wrestlers.
Yes, you are correct.
I have a question, though. Is Josh High the arch nemesis of Josh Prohibition?
What if this was Josh Prohibition attending the show, but he didn't want to reveal that he was just sitting in a live report? He was like, "What's a name that no one could possibly suspect it was me?" I definitely would not be Josh High.
Yeah, like if he stays at hotels and doesn't want to be recognized. Sometimes he's Josh High. Sometimes he's Josh Stoned. Sometimes he's Josh Drunk. Just he has a whole bunch of different. Then he's just Matt, he's just joshing us the whole time.
Matt, you got to save this for your act. Your early aughts indie wrestling themed act.
Yeah,
that's a closer level bit.
If people actually cared about WrestleMania weekend anymore, I could make a thing out of that. But I think I'm a little too late for it.
Might be coming to Saudi Arabia in a couple of years. We should do a road trip. But next up, there was two other dark matches. We had Damian Wayne defeating Rex Sterling, and Damian Wayne was like really big on the Death Valley Driver video review message boards at this time. And I remember people were probably jazzed about Worlds Colliding and him actually getting bookings in Ring of Honor. It did not really, I think he gets one or two more book. I think he's maybe on our main card show, maybe in 2008, but it does not take off for Mr. Damian Wayne. But I remember like the DVDR Playboys, they were a fan of him. And then your dark match main event was Azrael and Deranged, who we just saw in the first pay-per-view doing basically uncredited stunt duty, getting beaten up by Steve Generico without even being referenced by name by the announcers, defeated Gran Akuma and Michael Elgin. I believe this was supposed to be Gran Akuma and Hallowicked, but because Danielson got moved off the Seidel match, Hallowicked gets moved into that spot, and so Elgin gets to go here. And yeah, it's interesting that they were kind of, I'm sure, I guess Azrael and Deranged were Philly locals, but like they were almost between the pay-per-view and this, they were kind of dipping their toes back in the water there, but they never, do they get them on air, like on DVD? I'm not even sure.
Deranged pretty famously does, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But like, they don't become regulars again or anything like that. And so that brings us to the first match on the DVD. Matt Seidel defeated Hallowicked via pinfall in 9 minutes, 17 seconds after he hit shooting star press. Dave Prazak on commentary notes that Seidel's in demand around the world. Unlike a lot of ROH wrestlers with the recent move to pay-per-view, he has not signed a contract with the promotion. So this is the start of them turning a real situation into an on-air storyline with Prazak's calling him the hottest free agent in wrestling. And yeah, so, they're playing up the idea of like, is he going to leave? Is he going to stay? Matt, what'd you think about this match?
So Seidel's whole thing here is that he beats everyone who wears a mask. And that, like on the last show we talked about, I guess that's just El Generico and Delirious, but no, we were wrong. There's also Hallowicked now. So I guess the not trifecta, the quadrifecta would be him beating Jigsaw, I guess, at this point. But they missed it. They missed the opportunity because they unmasked Jigsaw, I think by the end of this year, maybe at the beginning of next, and they should have had Seidel beat him in a mask versus hair match or something. Seidel basically cut that promo on the way to the ring. He was like, "Oh, another masked man tonight. Everyone knows what happens. Every masked man in Ring of Honor falls." So, we've been watching Seidel like on and off do the heelishness on DVDs. It definitely was not sticking with this crowd yet. They were chanting for him, but they booed him a little bit when he pulled at Hallowicked's stem on his mask. And at one point, Prazak says, "Hallowicked with the stem advantage." And then Seidel pulls at the stem and Prazak says, "Or maybe disadvantage." So, but maybe Prazak meant that Hallowicked was better at science and math.
We gotta always record on Monday, man. You are killing it.
Yeah, I know, these are classic jokes that everyone's gonna remember forever. But yeah, I mean, there were some cool spots here. Obviously, these are two good athletic guys, especially Seidel. Um, he um, he gets his heel heat by pulling on the stem. He gets booed when he does it during a bow and arrow. There's a cool spot where Seidel bridges out of a pinning combo and goes right into a leg drop to the back while Hallowicked is still facing the canvas, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought Hallowicked did a nice little leaping Rana at one point, and there was the finish came when Hallowicked went for for an iconoclasm, which he had hit earlier. But Seidel rolled into a victory roll, but Hallowicked rolled through that and popped up with a big kick to Seidel's face. That Seidel took a big bump off for 2, and then Seidel went for the standing moonsault. Hallowicked got his knees up, and Hallowicked hits a sky high and gets a near fall off that. And then Seidel, he avoids a fisherman's buster after a series of reversals, and then he turns a Hallowicked suplex into a DVD and just hits the shooting star press for the clean win. I thought the last couple of minutes of the match had some cool moves, but mostly it didn't really have much of a spark, to me anyway. Definitely not bad, solid little opener, but maybe a little bit disappointing. Maybe I would have liked it to be a little bit better than it was. I thought it was fine, but not particularly good. But there was some cool stuff down the stretch.
Yeah, I think I liked it a little bit more than you by the end, but I agree. The first half of this match, I felt was just a little off. I had no problem with it being the slower half, being at the first half, but it just felt like they weren't flowing great together. But the back half, when they did decide to go at a quicker clip and just start pulling out the bigger moves, and once the pace got faster, I felt like the chemistry they had between each other improved as well. And I thought in particular this was a good performance for Hallowicked, who, in Philly was getting some good reactions from a crowd that likely had at least a couple hometown Chikara fans. And the thing I really noticed in this match was, Hallowicked's kind of a lanky dude. And so anything he does with his long legs, like his step-up Rana, his step-up kick, just the big boots, whatever, they seem to get bigger reactions just a little bit than if other people did them. And I think I realized well, not realized, but I maybe talked about it when I was on our friend Alan Forel's show on the PW Torch recently, where he had me watch a Brody Lee match. And I feel like if you are really lanky with long legs, you have to do a big boot because it just looks good. Like you are spitting in the face of God. If he has given you, and I don't even know if God is real or not, but if he is, and he's giving you long legs and you've become a pro wrestler, you have to do a big boot because it just, Kevin Nash, Brody Lee, Hallowicked, not quite on that scale of height, but he does have long legs for a guy his size, and it just looks good, Matt. But it's weird that I don't feel the same. If you have long arms, I don't go, you have to do a clothesline, but it just works for big boots. Overall, I would say this ended as a strong above average for me. It's a match where I would have liked a couple more minutes of them going at the clip they were going at in the second half. But for an opener, sometimes you want to leave the crowd wanting more at only 9 minutes. I thought this was a nice way to give you a pop of action to start the show without really filling you up. It was kind of like the wrestling equivalent of a one-bite hors d'oeuvre. And maybe since we both thought, parts of it weren't quite what we expected, maybe it's an hors d'oeuvre where the puff pastry, they put on a little too much of it. You would like a little more filling, but hey, still decent. And when Seidel goes back when he's leaving, not just when he comes in, as you mentioned, Matt, but when he leaves, he goes, another masked man tonight. I think he did when he was leaving. I'm not, well, actually, maybe it was just, you know what, Matt? I don't even remember. I watched the show a week ago. How am I supposed to remember things that happened on it? But it is interesting, too, that Seidel is still in this face-heel netherworld where he's, when he's pulling on the stem, anytime you pull on a wrestler's mask, I think you're being kind of heelish. But, at the end, after the match ends, he's, being a babyface, kind of. He's being cocky, but, he's kind of playing it up as a babyface.
And slapping hands and stuff.
Yeah. And, okay, I just saw my notes. Thankfully, my notes have, save me, Matt, where my memory has failed, because I did write my notes as Matt leaves, to go to the back. He tells the cameraman to give him any mask guy. And as you noted, Matt, I think that would leave us down to Jigsaw. So is he building out for the ultimate main event, Jigsaw versus Matt Seidel? And that brings us to our second match on the DVD. Daisy Hayes and Lacey, escorted to the ring by Jimmy Jacobs, went to a time limit draw in 10 minutes, which I'll talk about in a second. Before the match can start, Daisy charges at Lacey, and Lacey bails to the floor and grabs the mic. And she gets on the mic and tells everyone that she understands Daisy being mad after everything she being Lacey, had put her through. She knows Daisy is all about peace and love, and Lacey tells her that she has started a new chapter in her life. She just wants to come in the ring and have a straight-up wrestling match with no brawling on the outside. The crowd for the second straight night chants, "You fucked Jimmy." Well, I guess this first night they chanted, "You fucked Lacey at Jimmy," but same diff. Anyway, Lacey says she now knows about love. Lacey gets in the ring. She even offers Daisy a handshake, which Daisy accepts, and it occurs without a hitch. And then we get the actual wrestling match here. And this has to be one of the longest women's matches up to this point in Ring of Honor history, especially like a straight up singles match and not a 4-way or a tag, which I do take as, on one hand, as another sign of ROH's incredibly slow progression with how they treat women in this era, where that they trust 2 women to fill 10 minutes of ring time, and they do fill it. I would not say this was the most exciting women's match up to this point in ROH's history, but I think it is the most solidly worked. Like, they spend the first few minutes just grappling, trading holds, chain wrestling, and that's a luxury that women in ROH have rarely had up to this point due to all the time constraints they're given. You know, usually when you're getting 5 minutes, we've seen it once or twice, and it comes off kind of weird, like when you spend half of it taking to the mat, because it's like, you got such limited time, you got to grab people. But this time they actually do have the luxury of, like, they can do a little bit more action at the end, and also still, you know, do some more ground-based, slower stuff to build up at the start. And it's all done well enough. And really, over the course of those 10 minutes of this match, there's no big botch. It's all fairly smooth. And like in this era of U.S. women's wrestling, with the limited ring time opportunities they got, you were at times seeing rougher, less polished, less finished products. But here, it's just pretty darn professional, pretty solidly executed, straight down the middle women's wrestling. And there also isn't a lot of healing here. Lacey does wrestle the match straight up until she bails to the floor pretty deep into the match. And that's when Daisy joins her on the floor, that's when Lacey tries to use Jimmy's cane, which the ref snatches away. And then she turns it into more of a brawl on the floor for a very short time that she said in her promo that she was not interested in. And the other major bit of heel character work comes from the finish, where Daisy hits her big famous signature heart punch. She goes for her finisher, which is the mind trip snapmare driver. And Lacey builds to the floor and just stays out there knowing there's only a little bit of time left in the match, so she can at least walk away with a draw, which she gets. I think Daisy, for a wrestler who, as Lacey pointed out, is supposed to be about peace and love, I think she actually does have pretty good babyface fire in all the stuff I've seen from her when the situation calls for it. I think she plays the angry babyface that's really got like a burr in her saddle really well with her facial expressions and her overall energy, which is why I wish this match played more to that. These two had like a match not too long ago that we covered that was, I feel like, a meaner, rougher, nastier match in a good way. And I think deeper into this feud, you would have liked this to be even more of a brawl, more strikes, like more anger. And by the way they kind of played with the idea of, oh, Lacey just wants a straight up wrestling match, you kind of took a lot of that away. And then finally, the fact this match went to a 10-minute draw would be hilarious if it wasn't demeaning, because it's like one of my more minor ROH pet peeves is that when they randomly do a time limit, they never normally do for the obvious and sole purpose that they just want to book a draw and they don't want the match to go on forever. But usually when they do that with the men, it's like usually 15 to 20 minute time limit. And here for the women, it's only 10. And the sad thing is, in kayfabe, I can kind of justify that because in ROH, the women almost never make it to 10 minutes. So like, you know, in a weird way, you can justify it from that standpoint, but it is another one of those signs of like, well, women can't do 15 minutes, but you know, we can only trust men with that. But overall, I'd give this match an above average, maybe not as high as the previous match, but I appreciate again that they did a good job filling the time, even if I would have liked a bit more.
We talked about Daisy botching stuff, like, or being not necessarily even botching, but being a little bit sloppy in some past matches, and there's really none of that in this match. Like, you can really see her improvement, and I definitely agree with you about the fire. I did not mind like that this wasn't heated the way you wanted it to be, because I do think it was in service of a storyline that was, you know, at least supposed to be building to something. So, and like, you know, the character development of Lacey, you know, it's a second match on the show, so it didn't bother me really. Like, you know, if this was like supposed to be the blow off match, obviously that would be annoying. So I think it was effective in what they were going for. It was, entertaining for 10 minutes and when they were just wrestling. And yeah, like I think Lacey did show a lot of restraint in terms of like not going all out heel like the way she normally does here and kind of scaling it back. Even though she, you could see little glimpses of it, like when she, like you said, when she tries to get the cane and stuff, but it pays off later in the show. Like later in the show, she kind of like the artifice of that kind of gets stripped away during an angle that they have later. So, I'm surprised they didn't do that in front of the crowd, but they still did it. So I think overall it was effective. The match, like I said, it was entertaining for 10 minutes. That's about as good as I could say about it. And there was nothing. There was nothing wrong with it. It is obviously still frustrating that they never will give the women more than 10 minutes, at least up until now. I feel like they do at some point later in the year, but maybe I'm misremembering that. But yeah, it's funny because I remember I've complained about that with I think there was a match with Allison Danger and Sarah Del Rey where they were working like the beginning of what could have been a longer match and then it just ended. And it was like, oh, they should just try to give the women 15 minutes and see what happens. But based on this, according to ROH kayfabe, women are not even allowed to wrestle for 15 minutes. So I guess not. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay, I actually think that in some ways I liked it more than the opener. I don't think it was like better. It was like a better match in terms of like athleticism or execution, but I think it just had a little more weight to it. I think they were both of fairly similar quality, though, in my opinion, overall.
On commentary, I guess I should also mention that Dave Prazak tells us that Sarah Del Rey won the new Shimmer title in a 16-woman tournament in that promotion, and says that ROH will be recognizing that title in its women's division. So ROH will not have its own women's title, but they will. They are, Shimmer at this point was considered like a sister promotion to Ring of Honor. So, they're basically going to have, use it in that sense. I guess one spot I also forgot to mention. I think we've seen Lacey do this once or twice before, but instead of a drop down at one point, she does the splits, and Daisy jumps over her while she's in the splits and then hits her with a drop kick to the back while she's still in the splits. And to me, like, it is always so impressive, like, when Lacey, or when anyone for that matter, does the splits. Like, I don't know if that is physically risky to do that just really quickly on the fly in the middle of a wrestling match, or how strenuous that is. I mean, I know it would be strenuous for me, but like, I almost feel like if you could do that easily, as a promoter, I'd want you to do that in every match, because that's just such a cool, it always gets a reaction. It's something you don't expect, which maybe if you did it every time, you'd expect it. But I just think that's always just a really cool thing. And, Matt, we also have our old friend, Josh High. He gave us a note on this match from the Pro Wrestling Insider Live report. He wrote that Jimmy Jacobs at ringside was golden, at one point lighting a cigarette and smoking until either a ref or photographer told him to stop, presumably because it's a huge fine for smoking inside in Philadelphia. And yes, they do pick it up on camera, him smoking at one point, but I did not know from the live report that someone in the company told him put that. They went full Mean Gene, Matt. They told him to put that cigarette out.
If it was such a huge, so I guess the law changed in between the end of ECW and this show, because Sandman certainly was not worried about smoking indoors in Philadelphia.
Matt, you never know when the watchful eye of Frank Talent will be on you or not. So
you know that Frank was like, yeah, smoke, why not? Frank is one of those doctors that advertise cigarettes. Like, this cigarettes are represented by doctors everywhere, like in the 50s.
He recommends Lucky Strike. It's the more healthy cigarette.
Exactly.
Next, we join Eric Stevens backstage for the first of our promos promoting the Ring of Honor pay-per-view, and Eric says that he's just getting his feet wet in Ring of Honor, but ever since he's gotten here, he's had obstacle after obstacle put in his way. First, all the stuff with the No Remorse Corps, and now they've lost their leader in the Resilience, Austin Aries. Eric says with ROH now on pay-per-view, everyone has to step their game up. No excuses, including him. This was short, not good, and Stevens was also kind of strangely out of breath for it at the end, despite the fact he wasn't raising his voice during this promo. I will say, I don't say that any of that as a major put down, because I feel like that's what indie wrestling is for, is to practice promos and get reps and get good. And we've noticed people on covering through the years like Rocky Romero and the Briscoes, who became known for being very charismatic and kind of comfortable speaking. And if you watch their early performances in Ring of Honor, the few times early on when they're called to talk, they are not what you remember them as being. They are young people who are not comfortable doing it yet. And that's kind of the vibe you get here.
Also, it's just a weird thing for him to do a promo about, so that doesn't help, I don't think. It's not like the kind of promo where someone's going to feel passionate and get in the zone. So,
Yeah.
Talk about being on pay-per-view. Well, I wasn't actually on the pay-per-view, but, talk about how excited you are to be on pay-per-view. You know what I mean? Like, it's a weird thing, but, he's just one of many ROH superstars that has to talk about this on this particular event.
Yeah, I think that's something that we should note, which is there are going to be four backstage promos on this DVD promoting the Ring of Honor pay-per-view. None of the people with promos are on that pay-per-view. So it is a weird choice, I would say. But that brings us to our next match. El Generico and Kevin Steen defeated Jigsaw and Mike Quackenbush in 13 minutes, 9 seconds when Steen pinned Jigsaw after he was hit by the package pile driver brainbuster combo. Matt, what did you think about this big tag match?
This is one of my all-time favorite ROH hidden gems. I loved it then. I still really like it a lot now. Like it's just everything I like in a tag match. There was very clear babyface heel delineation. Steen was doing a great job of projecting that and just being extremely charismatic. Generico, not to say that he was a clear heel, but he worked in Steen's, to Steen's benefit, and he's obviously was an incredible wrestler at this, obviously still is, but, really, I think at the peak of his athletic game at this point. Quackenbush and Jigsaw, to me, were really breaths of fresh air in ROH at this time, and, obviously Quack had a lot of his own charisma. And what I liked about it, it was just like a simple format, but done with really cool athletic moves. It was really just they got the heat on Jigsaw for a while. They Jigsaw tagged in Mike Quackenbush, and then they just went into the big finishing sequence. They didn't try to get complicated with it, but the finishing sequence just had lots of cool shit happen. Right at the beginning, during the entrance, Steen was already super entertaining. He keeps like trying to move the camera from the cameraman's hand that was shooting El Generico and just bringing it to his face, being like, you don't have to film him. Like everything that you want is right here, so, which was a good way to start it. There was just some heelishness during the working over Jigsaw. He was daring Jigsaw to hit the ropes and knock him down, but instead he just ran him over with a back elbow and then like mocked the crowd for clapping for him and things like that. At a certain point, Steen attacked Jigsaw from behind as he's about to lock up with Generico, and Generico sort of seems frustrated with Steen being such a jerk, but he also gives it. And at a certain point, Steen also attacks Quackenbush on the apron so he can distract the ref and choke Jigsaw. Steen is just such a clever heel, like during this period. Like he just knows how to milk the crowd in every single possible way. His heat segment is just so entertaining for all the little things he does. And he was so wise beyond his years with that stuff. And it doesn't detract from like the wrestling aspect of the match. Like he's still doing all sorts of cool stuff, like his front flip leg drop. Eventually, Jigsaw hits an enziguri on Generico and turns a slam into a spinning DDT and then makes the hot tag, which I'd say gets an appropriate hot tag pop. The crowd was very hot for this, and Quack did a great job with the hot tag. At one point, Quackenbush rolls through a military press off the top, but Steen is able to powerbomb him, followed by Generico splashing him for a near fall, and that's when we get a big ROH chant. And we get a bunch of other really cool stuff. Jigsaw moves out of the way of the haluva kicks and hits a torture rack powerbomb, and then Quack follows up with a swanton to Generico, followed by a top rope leg drop by Jigsaw, followed by a top rope double knees by Quackenbush, and Jigsaw covers there, and Steen pulls him out of the ring. Steen tags himself in so he can moonsault Quackenbush, but Quack moves. Then there's a spot where Jigsaw goes for a leaping top rope Rana, but Steen catches him, holds him upside down so Generico can do a front flip coast to coast drop kick. There's a spot where Steen hits right after that drop kick. Steen hits a Jigsaw with a power bomb off the top rope and covers, but Quack breaks up the pin, and that gets a really huge pop. I think like probably one of the biggest in-match pops I can remember hearing in a while. What I really liked about that is like this match didn't like spam near falls. Like that was the big near fall in the match, and it just got such a spectacular reaction. After that, Generico dives onto Quackenbush on the outside so Steen can hit a package pile driver on Jigsaw, and then Generico immediately follows up with a brainbuster for the win. So I just thought like it just did everything right. Like I can't think of anything wrong with this match. Like it didn't overstay its welcome. It was a really good format. Steen was fantastic. The athleticism was great. The like I said, didn't overdo it with the near falls for its spot on the card, but still was just like pretty spectacular in terms of its pacing and athleticism and execution. I think that Steen and Generico are like the MVPs of Ring of Honor at this point. Like them, I mean the Briscoes too, but like Steen and they just like add so much life to the company, considering Samoa Joe and Homicide, and even at this point Aries are gone, and you don't have some of those bigger personalities. That's what Steen is bringing, and and Generico is obviously just incredible in the ring. So I just love this match. It's one of my favorite forgotten ROH tag team matches.
Yeah, I'm worried that this podcast is just going to become a Kevin Steen love fest, because after last show where we both really praised Steen, in fact, I think he won the Madoff Trophy last episode, I'm just going to have to praise him again here. I have said that, like, one of the great things about Jack Evans is that from the moment he walks out of the curtain to the moment he walks back through it, he is performing every second. He's always entertaining. He's always doing something, even if he's not wrestling in that moment. If he's walking to the ring, if he's standing on the apron as the illegal man in a tag or a four corners match, he's talking, he's emoting, he's performing. And Kevin Steen is very similar in that respect. Like, I might have mentioned this before, but one thing that was really instructive to me about Steen is hearing him say years ago, I forget if it was on a podcast or one of his 8 million shoot interviews that he has done in his career, that something to the effect of that his goal every night is to entertain. And if it's from having a great match, that's great. But if it's from like any other means, like a promo, an angle, whatever, that's just as great to him. Like he's just as happy if that's how he entertained people that night. And I think you kind of see that watching him in matches like this, where kind of like Jack Evans, but somehow with even more confidence, he's always doing something. Like when he makes his entrance, like you said, he's talking to the fans, he's talking to the camera person, he's talking to his partner or his opponents. He's always reacting between moves. He's emoting, he's taunting, he's playing to the crowd. Like if he can find a spare moment to do something, he's fitting something more in. He's yelling on the apron when he's not in the ring himself. Like, I think many wrestlers look at wrestling as like you're waiting for your turn to shine. If you're the illegal man in the corner, you wait your turn. If you're on defense and selling, you wait your turn, etc. I feel like Steen is never just kind of absent-mindedly there in a match waiting for his moment to perform. If he has a second to do it, he's good and can find it, he's going to do it. So, and they're also like, I feel like a lot of wrestlers who I think they got into wrestling because they themselves loved one part of it, and then they forced themselves to get good at the rest of it because it was part of their job. Like I think like a Bryan Danielson or a Bret Hart, what drew them in was the ring work, and they worked hard for years on their promos and character work because that wasn't their first love, so it wasn't what came naturally to them, but it made them more well-rounded performers, and they got good at that stuff over time. And on the opposite end, I think there's a million wrestlers who, because they were charismatic or cut good promos or had a great look or were huge, they had to force themselves to improve at the in-ring because the job required it. But when I watch Steen, I always get the impression that that guy loves it all. Like I never feel like he's not doing a part of the job of being a pro wrestler that isn't his favorite part. Like it all feels like it's his favorite part. And so, yeah, like in this match before the bell even rings, like you mentioned, he is so great. I love You mentioned the part where he's telling the camera guy to look at him and not Generico and pushing the camera towards him. I love that eventually the cameraman does let Steen like turn the camera, but eventually he does turn it back to Generico. And then after that, I don't know how Steen synced it up perfectly. He bends down while the cameraman's focusing on Generico to get his head into frame, like just perfectly, just to be like, it's a perfect shot. And it's just such an amazing little thing. And not only is it great on it, so it's like a great contrast to Mike Quackenbush, who, in terms of his character, might be, I would say at this point, Steen's polar opposite, where Steen is this unrepentant asshole who, you know, is even a dick to his friend, where Quackenbush is this super white hat babyface to the point of being kind of nerdy. So, like, during their entrances, while Steen is spending his entrance trying to steal attention from his own partner, after Quack and Jigsaw's entrance, Quack spends, like I say, a good like half minute retying Jigsaw's mask from like a dad tying his son's shoes. So I was like, just that alone, that is character work, you know, just that contrast of, you know, and, you know, that might not have been intentional character work, but it really is just such a great contrast. And so,
well, there's also a point like where during that entrance where Quackenbush actually points to Jigsaw so Jigsaw can do his big flip into the ring, like, so the crowd was paying attention to him. So, again, that was intentional character work.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes nowadays character work always equates to promos or big mid-match emoting or an angle, where like character work can just be little mannerisms, you know, little moments that add up. Like, yeah, that just paint a picture of the kind of person this character is. And yeah, you see stuff like that. And I thought this double shot, the previous show and this one, was like a great showing for Steen, but I also thought it was a really good one for Quackenbush. And I have to get it credit where credit is due, because on this podcast, I pointed out many times when I thought ROH didn't do the best job putting new wrestlers in the opportunity to show what they can do and to succeed at that. You know, we saw a lot of like 5-minute matches in poor positions against not on the card against not the right opponents. And I felt like ROH so far has done everything they could do to put Quack in a position to put his best foot forward, at least this weekend, barring putting him in a showcase singles match against a guy like Bryan Danielson, in which, by the way, when they come back to Philly, that's exactly what ROH does. They put him in a singles match against Bryan Danielson. So the previous night, they put Quack in a four-way, two guys he would know incredibly well in Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, plus a top star in the company in Nigel. They gave it a ton of time, and they let Quack kind of be the star of that match. And here, he's against a very hot rising act in the company that's super talented. He's in front of his hometown in Philly that knows and loves him. And they give him a good amount of the match. And guess what? And a good amount of time, I would say, actually. And guess what? Like, both nights, it works great. Like, the crowd loves him each night. Rereading the live reports of these two shows, I saw people saying the four-way the night before was the show stealer, which I wouldn't agree with, but I did enjoy it. And then I read the live reports of this night, and some people said, like, hey, if it wasn't for Nigel and Danielson, this would have stolen the show on this night. And yeah, this match was really well constructed to be a showcase for both Steen and Quack. Like, Quack gets to do a little early, including a really fancy sequence with Generico just to whet your appetite. And then we get that fairly long section of Jigsaw's face imperiled that, like you said, I completely agree, Matt. Like, it really lets Steen just shine as a heel. Like, the moves and stuff, like, they're decent, but they're nothing out of the ordinary from Steen in that control segment. But again, Steen is so good at being the asshole, and the crowd loves it so much. There's that sequence you mentioned where Jigsaw out-wrestles Steen. So Steen takes out to Generico, and within seconds, as soon as Jigsaw has his back to Steen, Steen runs in, attacks Jigsaw, then goes and tags himself back in. What's great about that is it's a classic double team distraction thing, except Generico's not in on it. Like, it completely works for their unique character of like a babyface and heel tag team, where Generico's like what? Like, no, man.
The accidental Arn and Tully.
Exactly. It is so good. Like again, great character work in the match, just on like a little sequence. And this is one of those two matches where 2/3 of the way of this match, I'm thinking, this is good, this is fun. But then, like, Quack makes that hot tag, and those last 4 minutes or so just get bigger and bigger and hotter over those 4 minutes, to the point where I'm going, okay, this isn't good, this is very good. And then by the end, I'm like, is this just outright great? Like, is this 4 stars?
What do you think this match would need to be 4 stars, if not what it was?
See, I almost wanted to put this just a sliver below, but really, you know, I also wrote my notes. You could convince me this was 4 stars very easily. Like, it is.
How many tag matches in ROH history are better from beginning to end, like as perfectly constructed and got over as well as this one?
I would say there probably isn't that many. Yeah, I would say, I guess my thing would be, if your standards are just tons of action packed in from minute to minute, maybe that's where you might go, it's not quite that.
I still think it had more of that than than the vast majority of tag matches in ROH.
I think you get a lot, and you covered most of it in the stretch run. This is such cool stuff. But I feel like the thing is, I would say in its defense is, if it maybe just doesn't go like barn burner 9 out of 10 from the first minute, that's in service of that fun, like, character building and control segment we just talked about, which you couldn't have, I don't think.
Which makes the match better, not worse.
Exactly. And I also just love, like you said, the when Quack and Jigsaw just hit 3 like top rope moves in succession. Like that just seemed like such a kill shot. That was just such a cool moment. And
if this isn't a 4-star tag match, and I don't think I've seen one in ROH.
Okay. Sometimes Matt, maybe I can be, I've been in a mood sometimes these last couple, but I gotta say, I really, really, really did enjoy this match. I think Steen and Quack are the stars of this match, but I thought Jigsaw and Generico were very good as well. And one last thing, I want to highlight Jigsaw's selling, because I remember when Jushin Liger worked ROH, I mentioned how amazing he was at selling and emoting just from using body language, because he has to. His mask covers his entire face. And I always say, if you want to learn body language in wrestling, watch Liger, because, again, he has to be great at it. It's all he's got to sell. And Jigsaw here, his selling, I will not say is Liger level, but watch how he sells in this match. He's got like a little bit of that. Like he really does a pretty good job of selling with his body language. And meanwhile, you've got Generico, who is not as handicapped by his mask because it shows his eyes and his mouth, but he always sells like over the top huge physically. There's a spot here where El Generico takes a swinging DDT from Jigsaw, and he just has what I can only be described as an extended seizure. Like, he's done this before, but this was really ridiculous. Like, I've watched videos on YouTube where trained dogs, like adorable videos, like attend to their owners that are having these insane grand mal seizures, and like sit on them and bring them a glass of water. And like, those real seizures I've seen were not as long and crazy at some points as the one El Generico does here for a tornado DDT. But there's the most important thing. Maybe, Matt, this is why I was almost hesitant to do 4 stars. I was on the borderline. There is an outfit handicap for El Generico here, and that's that he's wearing his blue outfit here. And like, I'm already on the record that I think Kevin Steen's blue outfit just feels weird and wrong. Like, to me, the red and black combo he wore in this era feels iconic for him. But however much I feel that way about Steen, I feel that way 10 times as much for El Generico. And when I see Generico in the blue gear, which he wears a fair bit in this era, the blue gear reminds me of like when you've ever played a wrestling video game where every wrestler had like 3 alternate outfits you could pick for them, but some wrestlers have always just worn the one outfit. And so the game developers had to like make up fake color schemes for the alternate outfit slots, and like they never look good or natural. And like, to me, even though Generico's worn this outfit a lot, it always feels like something a game developer picked for, like, oh, he only just wears the black and red. Like, we have to pick something else. And yeah.
So there we go, everybody. Trevor is the fashion police now.
Yeah, I definitely am. I am the new Tyler Breeze. But yeah, and again, like live reports looking at this, Dave wrote in The Observer, Steen and Generico beat Mike Quackenbush and Jigsaw in a match that also tore down the house. Steen and Generico are peaking as the new top contenders for the Briscoes. So yeah, 3 3/4 stars.
Anyway, everybody, don't listen to Trevor. This is a must-see match. You should go out of your way to see it. I'm serious.
Yeah, no, hey, yeah, absolutely. You know what? It is a great match, and it is. Yeah, I love it. But anyway, after the match and some encouragement from Generico, everyone shakes hands. But as Steen shakes Jigsaw's hand, he then tosses him through the ropes and immediately bails out of the ring to escape an angry Mike Quackenbush. Generico gets between the two on the floor. As Steen laughs and tells us he shook Jigsaw's hand, he just didn't let go in time. And then Steen then poses again to a bunch of boos, and he tells us he's got so much talent, that's why he's so big. Like, he's just like, I love that he's even like making fat jokes about himself. Like, it is so good. We go backstage where what the hell? We're joined by Irish Airborne for some reason. We haven't seen them much in Ring of Honor as of late. They introduce themselves and say they've had their ups and downs in ROH, but with the announcement of pay-per-view, it's lit something inside them. They want to be here. They ask for ROH to give them one more shot to show us what they're made of. I'll note that Irish Airborne do not wrestle on this show. They wrestle Steven Generico on the next show, lose that, and then other than one short match on, I think, the DVD exclusive part of the Man Up show, Irish Airborne never wrestle for the Gabe era of Ring of Honor ever again. Like, they do some... Oh, go on.
Just ROH DVDs, they've always made weird choices on who they give promo time to. Like, they thought it was really important to get over that Irish Airborne was asking for one more shot before they got basically thrown out of the ROH roster for good. It's like when they would open DVDs with like Daisy Hayes doing a promo for like a 3-minute match she was gonna have like second on the show. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like they've often made just odd decisions about which angles, which stories deserve promo time and which don't.
It's also an example of something ROH has done occasionally, which is weird, which is, a lot of times wrestling companies will do that thing where a wrestler's like, I haven't been doing well in this company. I've got to start putting together wins or I'm not going to make it, all that stuff. And ROH has done that sometimes where it does pay off, where the wrestler does eventually start winning and the angle, hey, they've proven their stripes. They were in a rough patch, but they've proven it. But they've occasionally done things like this too, where they've had wrestlers or they've said on commentary, like, this guy's got to win. This would be a big win. If they don't win soon, it's not going to go good for them. And then they just lose.
Yeah, well, at least with Jimmy Rave, it paid off because he came back as the crown jewel of the embassy. But yes, generally speaking, it's just nothing, and which is why it's like, why are you giving them promo time then? Like, it's just strange decision making.
Yeah, and it just makes them look bad where they're basically kind of admitting that they haven't caught fire in Ring of Honor. And they're like, give us one more chance. And then they get 2 matches and you never see them again. Like, that makes it worse because it's like, okay, we gave you a chance. And like in storyline, we think you failed. So, yes. But anyway, I guess we'll judge those matches when we get to them. The next one will be on the next show. But Davey Richards defeated Matt Cross via submission in 10 minutes, 13 seconds after he made him tap out to a Kimura. Speaking of repeating myself from the last episode with my Kevin Steen love, I feel like I'm running out of new things to say about Matt Cross, Matt, which is bad because we really haven't seen that much of Matt Cross in Ring of Honor. It's the same story every time. He has great athleticism, incredible body control. He's good for at least 2 or 3 very pretty, sometimes immaculately executed flying moves almost every time out. And he's kind of devoid in ring presence and doesn't have a ton of charisma. This is with the usual caveat that I think we've mentioned before, which is we're just talking about Matt Cross and ROH here. It's not that he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't have better performances at other places in different points in his career. It's not that he doesn't try to engage with the crowd here in this ROH run, but it just doesn't connect with me. Like in this match, when he sells in the moment, it's not terrible like the way he's selling, but for some reason there's something about that doesn't grab me. It doesn't make me feel sympathy. And it doesn't seem to make the crowd on this night feel sympathy for him either, because there's that one point where Davey is cheating and just dominating Matt, and the crowd starts chanting, "Fuck him up, Davey, fuck him up," which when you're the babyface getting beaten up by the cheating heel, that's not probably the reaction you want to hear at that point. But I will say Cross does get some chants at another point in the match, so it's nothing for him. And Davey, meanwhile, I would say, he's an example of a guy who he does those cool moves with his E and he works at that modern indie pace, but he has that ring presence. He has that charisma. In this match, a fan starts heckling him and like he instantly has a very specific comeback for like his dandruff. It's like, nice dandruff. And it's like, wow, like, so he didn't have that like in the chamber. Like that was something he just quickly looked at the guy, was like, "You've got head flakes," and again, that's just, the inches that make a mile of difference in a wrestler, the ability to be so comfortable to be like, "Fuck yeah, you've got dandruff." And, I will say, is it easier to be a charismatic heel than a charismatic babyface? Absolutely. But even considering that, I think you watch this match and there's still a noticeable difference between like the ease and comfort and presence that a Davey Richards has in 2007 and what a Matt Cross has. But in terms of the match itself, thought this was a pretty boilerplate mid-card 2007 ROH match, mid-tempo by the standards of the day, some cool spots, not overkill. Davey controls the majority of the match, but he does let Cross have his moments. I thought Cross losing by tap out in the middle of the ring relatively easily, though, for a guy that needs some momentum, probably not the best thing for him. But honestly, I don't think a win here would have changed much either or anything. So I thought this was like, I would call this a little bit above average, but instantly forgettable. I feel sometimes when you watch new guys on ROH who get a bunch of shows to establish themselves, they're kind of on a clock where they need to have that incredible showcase. You've got to buy the DVD for this match, because that's what Ring of Honor was built and sold their product on. And you can point to a bunch of them in ROH, right? Like Samoa Joe had his very first night in against Low Ki instantly. Just he has that kind of showcase match. Paul London, had his unscripted against Michael Shane, the famous match where he ran up the ladder in the corner, and they played that clip a million times on ROH DVDs. Aries had it against Danielson at the end of Survival of the Fittest 2004, I'd say. Steve and Generico didn't have it on their very first short ROH run, and you can tell how that hurt them, and we can talk about the reasons why maybe they didn't have it. But then the very first night on their second run, they have it against the Briscoes, and you see what a difference it makes in how they're used and the faith you could feel Ring of Honor has in them once they get that showcase match under their belts and prove they can do it. And like, if you're a Matt Striker or a John Walters or whoever, where you're consistently having good, solid, middle-of-the-road performances in your dependable hand, you can get a longer look at even an attempted push without the showcase match. Like John Walters got the pure title at one point, but that clock is still running, and ROH is a promotion where you eventually need one. And watching this match,
Walters actually did have some like standout matches. A couple of those matches against Xavier, especially that Fight Without Honor. But anyway, I get your
yeah, the Fight Without Honor, I would say would be the closest. Even the Xavier ones, I wouldn't say they were good, but I wouldn't say they were like, you got to buy the DVD. I would say the closest was the Fight Without Honor one. Like nothing that he did regular wise. There were a lot of good, pretty good. But I would say, I say all that just to say, I feel watching this match, I could start to feel like retroactively, like, oh, the clock is ticking on Matt Cross. Like, yeah. Not that this match was necessarily even put in a position, being 10 minutes in the mid card, to be that kind of crazy show stealer match. But you could almost feel in the booking, or just, I don't know, there's something about I can just feel of like, he needs to start having one of those.
Yeah, they clearly at this point, especially with Aries not there, do not seem particularly invested in pushing the Resilience in terms of like at least having them win. They're way more invested in pushing the No Remorse core. Like that's, the Resilience are there. They continue to wrestle the NRC, but they don't really win very often. You'd think, I guess the idea is Aries, they always knew Aries was going to be back, because otherwise they could have just put Delirious as the leader of the group, and they didn't. But by the way, they do discuss during the commentary, they mention Aries, he's unable to be in ROH because of his TNA contract. And, on the one hand, obviously that telegraphs the fact that he's coming back pretty soon. But do you think that they would have said that anyway? Like, ROH is just like an honest enough company that they would talk about it anyway? Most companies, if Aries is gone, they just stop talking about Aries, But do you think this was specifically to plant the seeds?
I don't know if it was specific to plant the seeds or not. I imagine they probably had some idea whether, I don't know if at this point it was going to be a lock that Aries would be able to get out of his contract, but we've already talked about on prior shows, there was reporting like weeks or months earlier that like Aries wanted to get out of his TNA contract, but they wouldn't release him. And it was going to come up later in 2007, but they had like TNA had one of those options they could or could not exercise. So you could definitely see Ring of Honor, even if they didn't know for sure Aries was getting out, they probably had at least that in the back of their head, right? That like, if TNA says, okay, we're not going to pick up your option, and Aries had just gone through that thing where, he got pissed off. We talked about where he got pissed off, that they asked him to tape a vignette on his birthday when it wasn't supposed to be a day he was supposed to work. And then he eventually showed up, but then TNA was like, no, screw it. If you're going to be this way, we're not going to tape it. And so they probably had some idea that, Aries was not going to be long for them. But I think they would have just mentioned it possibly anyway, because when they pulled all the talent, they outright said at the start of that DVD of Reborn Again, they actually had Lenny Leonard outright say like, hey, the talent is missing because TNA exercised their contractual option to pull this talent from our show since we're going to pay-per-view.
Yes, that is true. Good point. As far as this match, I'd say what I think was good about it is that I really like Davey's intensity. I just think that he's obviously not quite to the level that Steen had it, but I think that he was really trying to just lay it in with every bit of offense that he did. He was definitely, putting force into all of his kicks. He was exerting himself even pretty early in the match. And doing the crowd work that you were talking about. So I think that his aggressiveness contributed a lot to the match coming across pretty well. The downside is, unfortunately, Cross was just not connecting, just seemed to be missing something, and the passion and excitement in the match just wasn't really there. So, like you said, a boilerplate mid-tempo, mid-card match. But I do want to, point out Richards, his effort and his intensity and how solid everything he did was, because I think that really does contribute to the match coming off well. Just all of the kicks, the selling that he did, obviously Cross did that space flying tiger drop, and that always goes well. He's very good with that. But and then the tombstone right into the Kimura, he has that intensity that you want in somebody that you want to push. So I think that elevated the match to a little bit more than what it would have been otherwise. But I think quality-wise, I would say I'm pretty much in lockstep with you.
Yeah, I completely agree about the Davey Richards stuff. After the match, Davey goes a stomping in, a spitting on Cross, and Roderick Strong and Rocky Romero, they run down to join in. But then after a short time, Delirious's music hits, and he and Eric Stevens come charging out from the back to make the save, with Stevens and Roddy brawling to the back. And then Cross and Davey are soon joining in the brawl to the back, and that leaves two people alone, and the bell rings, and that's when we get Delirious defeating Rocky Romero via pinfall in 9 minutes, 3 seconds using a schoolboy. Matt, what'd you think about this?
So I like that it started hot and heavy. That was good. I do think it's funny that every time Romero does Asuka, the announcers always have to point out that it means sugar. This is very important to say every single time. I guess it's sort of a running gag. But then they go into the crowd, and I've heard discourse, I guess mainly from Voices of Wrestling and stuff, about AEW, not really being consistent with is this an ODQ? Is this legal? Is this not legal? People forget that ROH did the same shit. It was in their quote, quote, glory period. This is ROH is a no DQ promotion when it's convenient. They just brawl into the crowd. They hit each other with a million chairs. At one point, Leonard says, the ref is giving these guys a lot of latitude, I guess because of the impromptu nature of this matchup. And then Prazak says it's because the ref knows Delirious wants to get revenge on the No Remorse Corps. And it's what? That's is that imagine that logic in any other sport. The Red Sox and the Yankees have a really intense rivalry, so I'm just going to let them hit each other with balls. It just, it doesn't really...
Everyone can cork their bats tonight. It's a big thing.
Yeah, pine tar. We're allowing it. It's, I don't know. It's just... and then it becomes one of those hold the guys by the head and walk around brawls, and Delirious is repeatedly throwing chairs on top of Romero. And I'm not going to say it's not entertaining, but it is kind of generic in terms of the sort of crowd brawl that you get. And then, I guess I appreciate it that they wanted to differentiate it from the other matches on the show, but then just make it a no DQ match so it doesn't annoy me as much 18 years later, But it's pretty good for what it is. I think Romero is much better during this period in ROH than he was in that first period with the Havana Pitbulls that you in particular really didn't like. I think he comes off pretty well. I think Delirious has been pretty good with keeping his intensity up during these No Remorse Corps matches. He has a lot of energy when they get back in the ring, and he does Shadows Over Hell, but Romero catches the arm on the way down and goes to the cross arm breaker, and then the Delirious comes back with repeated strikes and punts and all that stuff. I always like when Romero does the Diablo armbar. I think that's always very cool, and it did have one of those kind of quickie roll up pins where you don't see it coming, which I think is good to do, maybe once on every show, just to make things a little bit more unpredictable. But overall, I appreciated the energy. I enjoyed the last few minutes, but I really didn't like the crowd brawl. I'd say it ended up being okay because of the energy at the end, but I just wasn't into the crowd brawl.
As a 9-minute match where half of it is a crowd brawl, this doesn't hold a candle to Kevin Steen versus Mark Briscoe the night before, which was a 9-minute match where half the match was a crowd brawl.
And a good
But
crowd, and a good crowd brawl.
yeah. I would say this match though was not bad. I would call this match standard, but not in a bad way. Maybe because they're the one match on the card doing the crowd brawl, I can accept it more as okay, you're adding a little bit of variety to the show, even if we have seen a match like this a fair amount of times in Ring of Honor history on this card. You know, it's the only match that's going to be like this. And what I would say, I probably like the crowd stuff a little bit more than you. I'd say for the half in the crowd, they do enough. Like there's a chair throw, a garbage can throw, a chair shot. They brawl at the back of the building. They brawl at the top of the bleachers. Delirious gets thrown to a brick wall. If they did the amount where if they did any less than that, I'd go, that's it. But they do just enough and just enough different things where I'm like, okay, you've justified going outside. You did some stuff. And I thought the most notable thing on the outside though was Rocky at one point near the end of the crowd brawl section. He gets Delirious sitting in a chair, and then he hits him with a running crossbody as Delirious is sitting in the chair, except they're doing it like right at the front of the crowd near the ring and the guardrails, and Rocky barely has any room to get a running start. And so his crossbody is like, it's very slow. It's almost humorous because he doesn't get much momentum behind it. It's almost like you're just something you could do, like jumping onto a partner, like, how you doing, honey? It's great to be home from work. Like it was very adorably kind of tame. But on the thing you mentioned, the DQ stuff, I agree. ROH is not consistent with stuff like that, or even with like ref distractions. I will say, I feel like Ring of Honor kind of had, it was not an official rule, but it felt like they were much more like, if you do something on the outside, it doesn't count. As dumb as that is, I feel like
I don't think that's better.
No, well, I think there's at least a lot. Like, if the logic was even in the ring, Ring of Honor usually did not do stuff in the ring in full view of the ref unless it was like a gimmick no DQ match.
Homicide would just do whatever he wanted, and like it was in any match. Like I feel pretty. I'm gonna die on that hill.
I just feel like generally you saw more often this kind of stuff when they hit the outside. Like, it would not be uncommon for a guy to get hit with a chair on the outside. I feel like that happened far more often than two guys in the ring in a regular match getting hit with a chair. Like, I'm sure it's happened in Ring of Honor, but I feel like it happened way more on the outside. There was just this weird conceit that, like, hey, if it's on the outside, the rest will look the other way. But
probably true that was more often. I just don't think there was actually any internal consistency about any of that stuff.
Yeah. I imagine that Ring of Honor was so. Yeah, that's one thing. Like, and we've talked about it a few times on the show. Ring of Honor was very inconsistent with stuff like how strict were they going to adhere to tags, which we might talk about later, like legal man stuff. How strict were they going to be about different rules or all sorts of things like that, they would kind of get in or even like the rankings and stuff. Like there was like a new ranking system every 2 weeks for a while. And like they would get, Ring of Honor treated like rules, like a lot of people treat like diets or something, where they get really excited, they're going to convince themselves this time they're going to stick to it, and then they quickly kind of backslide into like, this is hard to do.
I still love ROH, but like I think that people misremember how like consistent and how well thought out a lot of their booking and planning was at all times, and it wasn't. Like, there was a lot of inconsistency and a lot of sloppiness throughout that tenure.
And I think it's also telling in the sense that I think if you get most stuff right, like sometimes people like to act like, especially kind of our more intense, the kind of fans that maybe say in middle age are still doing a podcast about pro wrestling, those more like hardcore wrestling fans, that they're so unforgiving. But I think a lot of this stuff shows you that like if you get 80% of the product right or the big stuff right, like you can like we clearly, if you listen to this podcast, we like Ring of Honor, we big fans of it. But I think we're pretty open about the things that they did wrong or bugged us. But it's one of those things where it's like, I don't need a promotion to be 100% right, but you do need to get the big things right and the majority right. And I think a lot of times when you see people complain about the little things, some people are just being nitpicking to nitpick. But a lot of times I find if people are really getting mad about the little things, they're probably also not enjoying like the big things either. Like you almost start getting more annoyed by everything if the product isn't like loving you. Like I think there's been we're taping this the day after Forbidden Door, and there's going to be a lot of people mad about like the gummy bear spot that the Young Bucks did, and they'll be debating whether that was cool or stupid or whatever.
A lot of
But
people, a lot of people, or a couple of people in particular that you're thinking of.
Yeah. But I will say, I think, if you're not like afraid that this is going to be more of that, or if you're not already a little bit annoyed with some other aspects, similar vein, you probably just shake that off, right? Because God, there's so many times I'm watching a promotion I love where they have some weird act or thing in the undercard that I don't like, but it's like it's one segment of show on a product I'm really enjoying. I think it's easier to forgive that stuff, but like the weird DQ stuff on the floor. But I would just say, when they get back in the ring again, I thought this was another perfectly solid standard match. Like the last match, super straight down the middle. Seen it before mid-card wrestling. But because of the crowd brawling and even the in-ring in the back half having a little more energy, I thought this match popped a little more than the last one, but I'd give this like a strong above average. But again, a lot of matches on this show so far that aren't Steen and Generico and Quack Jigsaw kind of hitting that same give or take, a little bit mark for me. Anyway. Immediately after taking the pinfall, Rocky rolls to his feet and he lands his knockout kick to the head of Delirious, which I thought was really cool because, it was a schoolboy roll up he lost on, so he wasn't like hurt, and he just like immediately rolls through, was like, fuck you, kicks him in the head. And then Strong and Richards quickly join from the back. They lay boots to Delirious until Matt Cross and Eric Stevens run back out to make the save. They have a pretty intense back and forth brawl at ringside, like 2-on-3, with the no remorse core retreating, and as Rocky makes a pretty amazing face while selling his beating. I'll have to maybe try and find a screen cap of that for the show. PW Insider live reporter Josh High, he wrote, Eric Stevens announced it would be the No Remorse Corps versus the Delirious and the Resilience in a Philly street fight in August. And that's another thing Ring of Honor did on this weekend that I don't think they did sometimes, but I don't think they always did, which was they were trying the strategy of announcing matches the night of the show for their return visit, because the night before, I think, they don't show it on DVD, but they had already announced, like, when we come back to Boston, it's going to be Steve Generico versus the Briscoes in a street fight, and it's going to be, I think, Claudia, or I forget. There was one other match they set up on that show. I forget what it was. But on this show, I believe they announced to the live crowd, but by the end of the night, both this match and I think Brent Albright versus Morishima. So they were definitely trying to be even more direct about, like, look, buy a ticket for the next show. We're already telling you, like, stuff we've got booked. So we then join Larry Sweeney backstage. He is pumped. He calls ROH moving to pay-per-view an unprecedented happening. Things are real now. Things have never been bigger than this. He's going to make sure the money is right for Sweet and Sour Incorporated. They're on the move. And that's about it. This was like 20 seconds, and I would say call this like one of the most generic standard Larry Sweeney promos you'll ever see, and it was still packed with probably 20 times more charisma and energy than most people on the U.S. indie scene had in promos at the time. But by the standards of Larry Sweeney, this was about as basic as you could get, I would say.
How many managers have gotten to just do random shirtless promos, though? Like, I mean, obviously I know that Sweeney is a wrestler, but like in ROH, he wasn't a wrestler at all. And yet he was like just doing a promo by himself without a shirt on, looking totally buff. It was an interesting choice, I would say. But yeah, Sweeney should get promo time on every show, and he basically does.
And I will say, I did say no one who did promos on the show actually do the paper or appear on the first pay-per-view they're promoting. Sweeney actually does do the taped vignettes of him with Bobby Dempsey and Tank Tolan, but he's not in the building. He's for that stuff. So that brings us to a 4-corner survival match. Brent Albright defeated BJ Whitmer, Eric Stevens, and Jimmy Rave in 12 minutes, 56 seconds when he pinned Whitmer after he hit a half Nelson suplex. I'm a little torn on this match. Objectively, I should say it fits with the previous 2 matches, where it's above average but unspectacular mid-card matches of styles that you feel like you've seen a million times before in Ring of Honor, because this is definitely every random ROH 4-way with the dive train, the sequence where the 2 heels team up on a face and becomes a tag match for a few minutes, to the final few minutes where they go bigger and everyone starts ignoring the tags. And by those standards, again, I'd rate this as an above average match, because for me, average is usually a match where I feel nothing. I'm not feeling pleasure nor displeasure while watching it. It's me eating a rice cake. It is simply a thing that is happening to me. a match I'd rate above average, I'd say is a little better than that. I'm getting some active enjoyment out of watching it, but if you turned off the match halfway through and told me I couldn't finish it later, I probably would not be mad at you for that. That's to me the level of that. To me, a match I'd rate as good. That's once we start getting to that level, that's a match where I'm like, I want to go back and finish it later. Like you've got.
He'd get real mad if you turned it off. He'd be like, "Mom, I'm not going to eat dinner now."
Oh, I was a brat. But no, to me, this is above average in terms of the amount of action I was getting. Albright does a big forward flip dive off the top turnbuckle of the floor, which for a guy his size who doesn't do a lot of flying, that was really cool. Whitmer took a great bump for Albright's half Nelson suplex. It looked like he took it right on the top of his head. That was horrifying, but also cool. But, Matt, in terms of my actual enjoyment watching this match, it was less than above average because this match felt like it was designed to irritate me, like designed in a lab, because I've gone on and on a couple of recent episodes about how well I think Eric Stevens, while not being a monster, is a big enough guy to qualify as a rare, like true heavyweight for ROH. And combined with the fact that he's, a decent enough worker at this point in his young career and has solid athleticism, I would have liked to have seen him a little more protected. Not even in terms of wins and losses, just in how he works. Like, I see in a lot of these matches early on, they're having him sell a lot. They're having him work matches like he's 30 pounds lighter, or maybe some of that's his own choice, and 3 inches shorter than he is. And I just feel like you're not playing to the somewhat for ROH rare physical gifts he's got. And then one night after we saw a long tag match where they picked Stevens to be the face in peril out of all 6 guys, they have this 4-way where he is clearly, I'll just say, the bitch of the match. He's taking the most punishment. He's getting the least offense in. He's the face in peril when it becomes the fake tag match. There's a point where, like, I will just say, I feel like Brent Albright eats Eric Stevens alive in this match. He holds him up for a long time in delayed vertical suplex, and I'm like, is that impressive? Yeah, but of all the people in this match, why did he have to pick Eric Stevens to be the guy he does, the biggest guy in the match, to be the delayed vertical, other than maybe Albright, for the delayed vertical suplex? Why not Rave? Why not Whitmer? Then there's a moment in this match where Stevens breaks up an attempted suplex of Albright's by hitting him in the back. And Albright just basically stands up, turns around, and slaps Stevens so fucking hard in the face that it gets a "you got bitch" slap chant. And that slap takes Stevens out of the entire sequence. Like, it just made Stevens look like such a wuss, that like he kind of picks something and just a slap just puts him down. It's to the point where when Stevens does the choo-choo spot, I actually thought I heard a couple boos mixed in with the choo-choos, but that's often hard to tell. But one thing I could tell for sure is moments later when Rave breaks up Stevens' run of offense with a kick to the stomach, Jimmy Rave actually gets a pop for a kick to the stomach because it stops Eric Stevens' run of offense. And to me, I just felt like this is another match where I just felt like this is not how you want to present a prospect that, for all intents and purposes at this point, is supposed to be a babyface. And then add in how I'm just so fatigued by how patterned 80% of these 4-ways are. Like, I was able to tolerate the night before with the Claudio 4-way because I thought I really liked Claudio and Quack and Hero in that match. But I just thought, for the love of God, like, find some new ideas. They worked so many of these the same way. And then finally, Matt, the last thing. This match does, like, on one hand, this match does accomplish a couple things in the booking. Like, it gives Albright another win to set him up for the world title shot against Morishima, which he'll be getting the very next time they come back to Philly. And it does further the BJ Whitmer storyline by continuing his losing streak, and in particular, Albright getting the best of him yet again. Except, I hate how they did it. They have the same ref that Whitmer headbutted the night before to get himself DQ'd to ref this match. And so Whitmer's mad at him before the match even starts. But then we go to the finish, where we get another ROH trope I hate, which is who the legal man is important only sporadically. Like, as best I can tell, Matt, who is the legal man on Ring of Honor? It matters or doesn't matter based on these factors, like the mood of Gabe on that night. If a legend had recently attended an ROH show and complained about it, does it further a storyline? And what's the fullness of the moon on that night? It is so fucking random. And so, of course, Whitmer can't get the ref to count a pinfall. And, of course, that leads to Albright beating Whitmer when BJ's distracted because he wants to attack the ref for the second straight show. And, like, as always, I'll say this. If you want to ignore the legal man when matches get hectic, that's fine with me. If you want to rigidly adhere to who the legal man is all times, that is equally fine with me. All I ask from wrestling promotions about this is you pick one of those two lanes and you stick with it. And ROH never does. They like the time limit draws things, or the DQ things. There's a lot of things ROH does that they pick and choose when it applies to them, when it is convenient for the booking of the promotion. So, yeah, this match is above average in action. It annoyed me enough to be a below average in viewing experience. I'll split the difference and call it average, even though I just said average matches generally, the matches I rate average make me feel nothing, and this match clearly made me feel things, so maybe I should just say below average. But really, if it wasn't for those nitpicks, I would have enjoyed this match, but I've just seen too many of these fucking four-ways, Matt, so...
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have the same nitpicks you had. I don't think you're wrong about any of it, but like that's not what spoke to me about the match. I just thought it was not particularly exciting. I would say these four guys, like they're, all good in their way, but they're not the group to have like a series of like smooth four-way spots in the final stretch, which they sort of tried to do. I also think that like no one in this match is like Captain Charisma. I mean, besides the fact that Christian Cage is not in the match, like I just like in general, like there's like before the match, I would have said, oh yeah, it's probably not a match with a ton of personality. And I think that could have improved the match. It's just a full group of four guys destined to have a well executed but not particularly engaging four-way match, if that makes sense. I guess occasionally those kinds of matches do over-deliver. I don't really think this one did. Early in the match, Prazak mentions that Whitmer and Rave have the most ROH matches of anyone on the current roster. So I was thinking, I guess probably Homicide would have been the number one at this point, right? Overall.
Yeah, because he was there basically since day one. So yeah. And he almost didn't miss, he rarely ever missed a show.
Yeah, the only other people that I would think maybe would be on that list would be Joe and Cabana, but I would have to guess that like Whitmer and Rave probably gave Joe and Cabana a run for their money in terms of numbers of matches, especially Whitmer. He didn't really, he had a couple little stretches where he wasn't there, but, never for very long. He was always like coming back too soon and stuff like that. But yeah, just a side note. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a ton to say about the match. I did like the somersault dive to the floor because I did not expect it, and that's always fun. I did like the delayed vertical suplex. It didn't really bother me that it was done to Stevens. I think the issue that you have with Stevens is that they're just, like I said before, they're just not really protecting the resilience at this point. And so like both him and Cross are getting treated that way. And I think they just see Eric Stevens as part of that group. And, and I guess it's also just a simple pro wrestling dues paying attitude that you get sometimes. And also he has yet to have that big breakout match that would probably get Gabe to say like, okay, this is a guy I'm going with. Yeah. And, I think he'll eventually have some very memorable matches, especially with Roderick Strong, but hasn't had one yet. So I think this is just going to be his position, at least when he's in like matches where he's not tagging with the other resilience people.
And that brings us to our ROH World Tag Team title best 2 out of 3 falls match. The Briscoes successfully defend their tag team titles when they defeat the Kings of Wrestling of Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, escorted to the ring by Bobby Dempsey, Larry Sweeney, and Tank Tolan. 2 falls to none in 17 minutes, 59 seconds. The Briscoes defeat the Kings of Wrestling in the first fall in 10:38 when Jay pinned Chris Hero after a J Driller, and then the Briscoes beat the Kings of Wrestling in the second fall in the 17:59 mark when Jay pinned Castagnoli after a springboard Doomsday Device. And yeah, this is the second match in one of Gabe's 2007 booking projects with Ring of Honor, which is to both build up the Briscoes as not just dominant tag team champions, but so dominant that they're the kings of these 2 out of 3 fall matches, winning them in 2 straight falls, and simultaneously try to train fans that in ROH 2 out of 3 falls matches can end in 2 straight falls, because this is they'll have more of these, but this is the second time this year. I think the first was against Aries and Strong, where the Briscoes have a 2 out of 3 falls match, and they win in 2 straight. Matt, what did you think about this match?
So I've obviously had a great memory of the Briscoes Kings of Wrestling match from Final Battle, which we reviewed, over a year ago now. But This one I remembered liking, but I didn't remember much about it at all. And I would say I was pleasantly surprised. First of all, the crowd is very hot for this. They were just like super into booing Hero. They were super into cheering the Briscoes. The Briscoes are regrettably wearing their Confederate gear here, which I'm never not going to notice and be bothered by. But whatever, I guess. But yeah, this was obviously a different dynamic than their other matches because it was a lot of the character stuff where Claudio is not really part of this Sweet and Sour Inc. peanut gallery, and he argues with Sweeney a little during the entrance. Although I wouldn't say they play it up a lot during the match. You don't really see a lot of like miscommunication or disagreement between Hero and Claudio, or even Claudio and Sweeney and Toland and Dempsey. You still get the wackiness of the entrance, like just like all these people doing their crazy shit and like everybody getting down doing push-ups while the Briscoes are entering and stuff like that. Which I think added to the entertainment. But I would say as far as, well, actually the other thing I'll mention is the story justification for this match is that since Claudio and Sydal stole the show against the Briscoes at Respect is Earned, they each get to choose a tag team partner to go against the Briscoes with. I'm not really totally clear why they wouldn't just like have a rematch themselves, but whatever. I guess it's
that was really. Oh, I just want to say that was really weird because we talked about on shows recently how weird it was where we thought the whole storyline was Claudio won a tag team match with the partner of his choosing because he beat Jay Briscoe in a singles match, and then Mark said, "Hey, yeah, sure, you can do that." And we thought that match was the Respect Is Earned match, the Matt Sydal Claudio tag. But it sounds like the way they were talking on this show, was what that match was. And then I think the way they talk about on commentary, they liked their performance so much that they gave Sydal and Claudio each from that matches where they got to pick a mystery partner. They each got one because I believe the next show is Matt Sydal and Claudio again against the Briscoes because Sydal picks Claudio for his dream partner. And it's weird. So in other words, it's like Claudio gets a match as like a pick a partner match. And then from that match, he gets another pick a partner tag match. It's like you got a coupon for using a coupon.
Yeah. It's also like kind of like, oh, wow, I guess Sydal likes you more than you like him, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
But
like how embarrassing would that be if like we each got like prizes for vacations and like you get to pick one friend and I was like, man, I'm taking you, and you were like, oh, I going on my vacation with somebody else. Like, oh, that's, I guess that's understandable.
Well, I definitely know people out there that have been like, yeah, like this person thing, like I'm this person's best friend, but they are definitely not mine. Like,
yeah.
That, I mean, that exists in the world. But what can you do, I guess? But as far as this match, Hero really leaned into like, I'm going to walk around and do my, what Trevor dubbed deep knee lunges around the ring. And, and basically every time he does it, the Briscoes respond by like hitting the crap out of him in a really dynamic way. Whether it's like Hero getting booted in the face or Hero getting bowled over by the double shoulder tackle. So like, it works. Hero's definitely a lot during this era. Like he really, really just like really overdoes it. But I will say that the match is like very fast paced. It really just like they never stop. Like it's just hard hitting moves, cool holds the whole time. Mark is great against Claudio and Hero getting worked over early. Jay gets a hot tag and goes wild, and I just think he looks awesome. He just kicks the crap out of everyone, and he clotheslines Castagnoli to the floor. I also like the spot, just ending the first fall because Hero boots Jay in the face, and instead of following up, he just does another quote deep knee lunge and allows Jay to just quickly recover, boot him in the stomach, and just hit the Jay driller and get the first fall. So I do like that the idea that Hero's nonsense just cost him the first fall for absolutely no good reason at all. Like at the very least, he's not doing it without any consequences.
Yeah.
The second fall, because Hero was knocked out by the Jay Driller, it's really just a handicap match with Claudio against the Briscoes, and it's really, really good. Like, Claudio looks awesome here. Just very fast paced. Claudio keeps trying for the giant swing on both Briscoes, and they keep cutting him off in different ways. Mark cuts him off with redneck kung fu, and Jay cuts him off with a big boot. And then eventually he does get to do it, but it's and then gets a European uppercut for a 2 count. There's a spot where Briscoes Beal Claudio basically across the ring, which is always very impressive on Claudio because he's so big. Finally, Hero gets back in and he breaks up a pinfall by just like stepping on Mark's back and running across the ring. There's a cool spot where Hero does a front flip cravat off the middle ropes, and then the Briscoes hit Hero with a top rope leg drop side slam combination. Actually, Heroes is using the choke slam more during this era. He does like a dropping to his knees choke slam on Jay, and then Claudio follows that with like running up the ropes, hitting a head scissors on Jay, and then Hero rolls to the outside to boot Mark, and Claudio hits the Alpamari water slide and gets a near fall. And at that point, we get an ROH chant because this is like just a lot of very good action here. Jay escapes the Ricola bomb and goes for a Jay driller, but Claudio avoids it, and Sweet and Sour Inc. They block Mark from hitting a springboard to do the Spike J Driller. So Mark just instead does an Acai moonsault onto all of Sweet and Sour Incorporated. And then back in the ring, Claudio hits a springboard European uppercut and hits Jay with the Ricola bomb, but Mark breaks that up, which gets another really big pop. And then finally, the Briscoes just hit the springboard Doomsday Device on Castagnoli for the win. So yeah, it wasn't as good as the final battle match or anything, but I thought it had really good action and everyone looked great. Had some storytelling with the Kings of Wrestling dynamic. I think 3 falls would have been more dramatic in terms of just like, making this match on its own excellent as opposed to like just really, really good. But it was so well wrestled and it didn't overstay its welcome that I was pretty impressed. I thought this was the second best match on the show pretty easily, at least on the DVD version of the show. I guess if someone liked it better than the Steen and Generico match, I wouldn't necessarily argue with them. But I thought that one was a little bit more compact and better. I was pretty impressed by how they did this, and I actually think there were some advantages here for the 2 falls because it made a lot of the near falls for the Kings of Wrestling in the second fall believable because you would expect them to win one of the falls at least. So I think it made some of those near falls more believable since you kind of probably wouldn't expect they would actually win the titles. But overall, I really liked it. I thought that it was very well done.
So before I get to the match, I kind of want to just ask you a little bit about what you think about the booking, because I got a little more to say about the booking, because I was thinking about this, like the idea of this match being that Claudio got to, after having the match with Seidel, it being so good at Respect Is Earned, that he gets to another match where he gets to pick his partner. In one way, Claudio picking Hero makes perfect sense to be his partner because he and Hero were ROH Tag Team Champions together, and they went 1-1 against the Briscoes in 2006. So, you'd think, hey, I got a good shot if I pick Hero to get the titles back. But on the other hand, like, Hero abandoned Claudio late the year before to align himself with Larry Sweeney. So even if Claudio was willing to let that slide, I started to think, well, why are Hero and Sweeney willing to put themselves right back in the situation they voluntarily left months earlier? Like, yes, there's a tag titles on the line, but they probably could have gotten a rematch if they didn't break up to begin with. Like, I was just thinking the whole Hero and Claudio feud got off to such a weird start because you think about it, they make that initial split up kind of muted because Hero doesn't attack Claudio or anything. He just goes, well, I'm picking Sweeney over you, and leaves with him. And even here on this night, I felt they did do a good job showing during the match, like, Hero and Claudio got along, but Claudio and Sweeney hate each other's guts, which is so far always been the story, which is, that Hero doesn't really hate Claudio. It's just he's picking, up to this point, he's just picking Sweeney over him. But it's created this weird story where they split up the tag team, but in a way without a lot of heat, then largely kept them apart for the entire first half of this year after they split them up at the end of the previous year. And then they have this weird one-off match to kind of almost redo the split again and kick off the feud. But then I started thinking, well, it is more understandable when you remember a couple of things. Like, on one hand, Claudio and Hero were supposed to hold the ROH Tag Team titles longer than they did, and they only lost them and split up so soon because Claudio thought he was going to sign with WWE, and then that fell through at the last second, and then they had to cut with this new way forward. And then 2, Hero did miss a few shows early in 2007 working a Noah tour. So I could see, I don't know this as a fact, but I could see ROH thinking, well, we don't really want to start this feud until like Hero's really consistently here. So, but like, what do you think? Like, am I crazy? Is that me nitpicking again, or just like this weird? It just feels like it's been a weird way to get to what I think is now finally going to start to get rolling as a feud.
I think you're right that it's a little weird, but like I can forgive it because I do think it had a lot to do with what you were talking about, Hero's schedule. Like he was gone in a couple different points for to do Noah and other things. So I think now he's pretty much solidly back. And so, like, they're going to get things kicked off now. I think they would have done it sooner if not for that. I think even, like, he had been gone for, like, the previous month plus, before this double shot weekend, right?
Yeah.
So, and also, this is not the beginning of their feud, right? They really kick it off much later in the summer with the turn. So, and as far as, like, the logic, I think, you could easily explain it, like, just Hero and Sweeney are not going to turn down a tag title shot. Claudio's kind of in denial about what Hero's really up to and the dynamic of their relationship. I think that's what's going on. And the idea that Claudio loses here and takes the fall. Well, I think they figure they're going to be doing a lot to push Claudio over the next couple months, so it's okay, and they want to keep Hero at least a little bit strong. And he took the first fall, so they don't want him to take both. So I actually I don't mind the booking, even though you could obviously poke plenty of holes in it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As you often do, Matt. When you talk, you have the siren song that gets me closer to your end of the beach. So, so as far as the match, I would say these two teams, they've wrestled twice before in ROH. We've watched and reviewed at International Challenge and Final Battle 2006. I would describe their first match at International Challenge as good, not great, and I think we both described their second match at Final Battle as pretty fucking awesome. I would put this match between the two. Like, I actually would say I like this match evenly with Steen and Generico versus Quack and Jigsaw. I wouldn't say I like this better or worse. I would say it's roughly the same level, but maybe just in a there's different reasons to like this match. But first off, like you said, I thought the crowd was shockingly hot for this. Like, I thought the crowd would be into all these guys, not like expecting them to be silent because these are all over acts, but at times, including like moments before the match, there were moments I would describe this crowd as like outright molten for different moments of this match where they just friggin' love the Briscoes. They love and hate Chris Hero. That they are just really into this. And then they get to the wrestling, and stylistically, it is a 2007 Briscoes style tag with all the positive and negatives of that. It's got that pretty unrelenting pace, moves, lots of effort. But I thought there was a couple interesting structural things you got in this match that you don't always get in Briscoes matches of this era. Like, Hero has his, like you said, has his wacky shtick dialed way up here. I know, speaking of almost like the old version of like the Young Bucks or stuff, like, I know not everyone had in this era had a taste or an appetite for Hero going this shtick heavy. Some people hated it, some people loved it. I would say from doing this show with you and reviewing these shows, I can tell you don't hate it, but I think I think it would be safe to say I have a bit more of an appetite for it than you, even though there have been some matches where even I've been like, for this match, he almost dialed it up too much. But I thought it worked here for like one of the reasons you said. Like, I like that Claudio was happy to play along with the double teams, but I also like the contrast of this wasn't heel Claudio. He didn't go back to being a heel for one night. He's still playing to the crowd. He's not being a dick the way that Hero is in this match. This match is much more of that Steen Luger in the mid 90s, or that even that Generico Steen dynamic of a heel and a face that happened to be friends. And yeah, I enjoyed how Hero shtick on this match, like you mentioned, it had a payoff where, that first fall ends with, he hits a big boot. He over-celebrates like a 2007 Chris Hero would, and then he turns right around, kick into the stomach, Jay Driller falls over. And I think why it worked for me, one, is like you said, it is a heel, that classic example of a heel getting like almost immediate comeuppance for being a heel and being an idiot. But I also liked that, like, in Briscoe's tags, you expect falls often to end with 18 big spots, like bang, 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 bang. And there was something kind of surprising and kind of satisfying of how simple and abrupt the first fall was with, just heel showboats, immediately turns around, gets caught, one finisher, it's over. And I feel like that's one of the kind of things you can do more easily in a multi-fall match. It's something that stip allows you to do, because if you have this natural inclination, which I don't necessarily even always agree with, but the idea, we have to end our matches with these big, runs of stuff and really build and build and build to a peak. Well, in a match where you have more than one fall, you can do something like this in the first fall and still get to do that later in the match. So it's kind of an advantage of that, actually. And then the second fall starts, and Hero spends maybe I would say the first 4 minutes of it being out cold on the outside from the J Driller, having been rolled to the floor. And Claudio has to wrestle the Briscoes 1-on-2 that whole time. And normally the heels being in a position to get sympathy would bug me, but because Claudio is actually a face kind of in this match, this actually works for me in a way where it normally wouldn't. And it also works for me because 2007 ROH Claudio is fucking great. He was better as a singles as soon as he turned back face, but I feel like he's really hit another level on the last few shows, to the point where I think this is the best he's been in ROH thus far. He's just so on point. He's showing off that special blend of athleticism and strength, like you talked about, how good he looks, even doing Beals, the kind of thing you'd expect the bump a smaller guy would take, and he does it really well too. There are a couple moves in this match where he just hurts Mark Briscoe up and just tosses him like such a strong man, he's just so impressive. And then Hero recovers, and we get an even bigger final few minutes. And I'll say this, I don't know if Gabe's 2 out of 3 falls booking strategy was already paying off just because they had the Briscoes beat Aries and Strong earlier in the year in 2 straight falls, or if this was just a matter of this crowd was really being into this match and being super hot for a lot of stuff in this match. But I will say this crowd was hot into the big near falls on both ends in the second fall. They were on that last fall, the Briscoes score where they win the match. That crowd certainly is reacting as it's happening, as they think the Briscoes could win on that fall, and they do. So at least on this night, I think it would have reacted exactly like probably Gabe would have wanted, which is, they buy that anyone could win that fall number 2. And I also have to say, Mark Briscoe is so great. He plays the face in peril in the first fall, and in so many Mark Briscoe matches, before it's over, he's done 1 or 2 insane bumps and a little touch or 2 that feels fresh. I love when he does that simultaneous top rope drop kick and clothesline on Claudio and Hero before he makes his hot tag. I love that Mark, when he charges Claudio in the corner, and then he takes that crazy bump game backdrop over the corner to the floor. Mark is the ROH king of crazy, I'm going to take just completely unapprehensive, no hesitation, throw me over the top rope to the floor, wild bumps. He's done a bunch already in ROH. And I even love he does this bad up run up the ropes in the corner that ends in a drop kick, which I thought looked great too. And then I also want to finally point out, there's a moment in this match where Claudio goes for a giant swing on one Briscoe. The other Briscoe immediately breaks it up before Claudio can really get the giant swing going. Claudio then attacks that Briscoe, immediately puts him in the giant swing, but the first Briscoe that was put in the giant swing immediately gets up and breaks that up before the giant swing can get going. And it all happens so fast, and Claudio never gets a chance to get going with either giant swing in that moment. That's kind of unintentionally hilarious. If you listen on commentary, you can hear Dave and Lenny break up about just for half a second about how ridiculous it is. It's sort of I can only describe it as when you were a kid and you touched something you weren't supposed to, and your mom or dad caught you and said, "Don't touch that," and so you stop, and then you immediately try and touch it again while they're looking at you.
Trevor's talking about his penis.
Often cake batter, but those were the 2 favorite things. They still are, Matt. They still are. But so overall, I maybe like this a little more than you, but again, I would put this as, I didn't like this better than Steven Generico's match, but I would say this is equal. And like I said, this is not the final battle match, but it's definitely their second best of the 3. Dave wrote in The Observer about this match based on live reports. He wrote, "This was a slower paced match than their December match," which I don't even know if I would necessarily.
No, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, exactly. And Dave wrote, "This finish is part of a long-term strategy, both to put the Briscoes over strong, but to establish psychology in 2 out of 3 falls matches. The feeling is those matches lost their luster because people figured out the first 2 falls never mattered. By doing 2 straight fall wins for the Briscoes, and this is the second time they've done it, the feeling is a team winning a second fall can get over for a rematch simply because they took a fall. It gets the Briscoes over strong because they don't lose falls, and it makes every fall important for future 2 out of 3 falls matches." Now, Matt, I didn't look up all of Ring of Honor's matches, but because I read this again, and this is something that's come up multiple times, I was like curious. So like, the Briscoes have a bunch of 2 out of 3 falls matches this year. They don't have a 2 out of 3 falls match again in the rest of Gabe's run. Like Gabe books most of 2008. They don't do it again. And like no other booker picks up on it until like, I think the Briscoes don't have like a 2 out of 3 falls match until like, I forget how long, but it's many years later in ROH they have one against the Young Bucks.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a waste that since they spent the whole year getting that concept over.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, exactly. I felt like they're putting in a lot of work to do this, and then I think the payoff is the Briscoes lose one fall in a match they win to the No Remorse Corps, and that's it.
Like, it wasn't a very good payoff, but I guess we'll find out when we get there.
Yeah. So after the match, we can hear an angry Hero tell Sweeney he's finished with Claudio before having Bobby Dempsey carry him on his shoulders to the back. And like I said, well, I didn't say this before, but I did some more cage match research on this. If memory serves, and cage match serves me, the Kings of Wrestling do continue to work together quite fairly frequently in other places, in Noah, in other indies. But I think this is the last time they work as a tag team in ROH until 2010. So no more for them and for our run on through the years. And next we join a very lively Daisy Hayes backstage, who says it's like there's a party in her head and she's so excited about ROH going to pay-per-view. And but she's most excited about being able to prove that the Women of Honor are by far the best women's athletes in the world. They blow the people you see on TV women's wrestling out of the water, at which point Lacey runs into the frame and she shoves Daisy to the floor. She laughs at her with her Minnesota Home Wrecking Crew tag partner, Rain. I will point out that the Women of Honor don't get a match on ROH pay-per-view until the 4th Ring of Honor pay-per-view, at which point they get a 3-minute, 22-second Daisy Hayes-Sarah Del Rey match. So this was, again, another weird thing on the show where they're like making a point that doesn't really get borne out.
Yes, and yes, I mean, obviously. Also, this is where Lacey reveals that she was insincere about being all about peace, love, right? She just goes back to being a total prick. Can you call a woman a prick? Is that a gendered term? I don't even know.
Sure, you can. I mean, certainly you could say that women have balls. Like Stephanie McMahon had lady balls, famously.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was I wasn't sure if that was a gender neutral insult or not. But hey, it's 2025.
Matt, I was watching a British Only Connect, the best trivia show of all time, before we did the show. And I learned today that non-binary people in Spanish, you're supposed to use the @ symbol to refer to them because they're neither A or O, because that's Spanish language. So learn something new every day.
And now the deep vein thrombozos have learned it as well. Thank you.
So next we have a dark match. It is Bryan Danielson defeating Nigel McGuinness, 24 minutes, 31 seconds. I am sure we'll never see that, and it's not important. And that brings us to the main event. But that's important context for something I guess we can talk about in a minute. But like, if you would watch this match live, like you would have just watched one of the greater ROH matches of the era, maybe of all time.
Yep.
And this had to directly follow it.
Yep.
And that match being ROH World Title match. Takeshi Morishima successfully defended the world title when he defeated Roderick Strong, not Rocky Strong, escorted to the ring not by Roderick Romero but Rocky Romero, and he won that match by pinfall in 13 minutes 14 seconds after he hit a backdrop driver. So yeah, like on paper, this match had some things stacked against it. It's at the end of a big night of wrestling, like all main events are. It's following a fantastic Danielson-Nigel match. It's a match between a heel and, in Morishima, a guy I would say, if he's a force of nature tweener at this point, he probably leans a bit closer to the heel side than the face side. And there's no real storyline these two have against each other to play off of. And what I got watching this was I thought you got one of the hotter starts to a Morishima ROH match so far. They just take it to each other at the start. I always love when Morishima's monster character gets to do things that no one else in ROH can do. And here he gets to do one of those things where he gets to run through a Roddy chop and no-sell. And there aren't many guys in ROH, maybe anyone I've seen so far, that got to no-sell a Roderick Strong chop. And he sells a bunch of the chops later throughout the rest of the match. But I did thought that was cool. Like, ooh, he even gets to like break through a chop and just run through it. And anyway, this open then has one of the coolest spots I've seen in a while, where Roddy does that insane running sick kick he normally does, but he runs off the apron and hits Morishima right in the fucking face with it. I like slow-moed it. It looked like he really did make contact as Morishima is standing on the floor. It was
and knocks him into the guardrail doing it.
Yeah, just a crazy hot opening way to start this match. And then Morishima does what I would say he usually does at this point in his run, which is he has a mid-match little section, not too long, but where he slows things down a lot. He leans on his opponent, stands on him, grabs a quick chin lock. But I think I said on the last episode of Through the Years that Morishima's ROH act at this point is already pretty set. And if you've watched all his matches up to this point, and the enjoyment comes in what his opponents bring out of him and how they play off of him. And I think Roddy does well on both fronts here. Like, it's been said at times, like Danielson wrote about in his book, that Morishima could be a little light on smaller wrestlers because he was afraid of hurting them. And I don't know if it was the sick kick or the chops, but in the first half of this match, he goes back to regular Morishima in the second, I think. But in the first half of this match, it felt like Morishima was putting just a little bit of extra stank on his offense against Roddy. Like, it felt like maybe something had bothered him a little bit, because we will get a big example later in the year of, if you do hit Morishima hard, he will turn it up against you. But the fun of the match for me is how Roddy sells it here, because like I've never seen Roddy sell this much, or at least sell in this way in ROH. Like, he's treating this match like it's the fight of his life, where he's the underdog, which is how he should be treating it. And he's famous, Roddy, for being one of the best cardio wrestlers of his generation. And if you listen closely at times, Roddy is fucking huffing during this match at points, like just gasping for air. And I don't know if that's just him really putting a lot of himself into this, or just him selling. And I also felt like Roddy's style of these quick sequences of rapid fire, hard hitting offense, where he hits like combos and moves like 3 or 4 things in a row real quick. They're perfect for Morishima, because Morishima can take 2 or 3 of them and half sell them, but still stay standing. And then that 4th or 5th move is going to be the move that like cumulatively brings Morishima down, or forces him to really sell. And I also just thought there was a little more physicality and weight to this Morishima match than some others. Felt a bit more like a war. And Roddy gets to take Morishima off his feet a few times, including a moment that the crowd goes nuts for when he lifts him up for the gut buster. And then Morishima, meanwhile, he actually lets Roddy survive one backdrop driver by grabbing the ropes, as well as a big follow-up lariat before the second backdrop driver puts him down. So I would have loved to have seen a rematch between these two, because I don't even know if I'd say it's good chemistry in that like they discover something new against each other. I just thought it was more like, I think what Roddy naturally does in matches plays off really well with what Morishima naturally does in matches. And it's a credit to these two guys that after the stuff they had to follow, I felt like the fans were into this match even at the start, but they ended the match hotter than the crowd ended hotter than they were at the start, which is what, that's a victory. If you get the fans more invested over the course of a match, that's all you can ask for. And early on in this match, when Morishima got on offense, you could hear one fan shout overrated. But by the end of this match, I don't think anyone in the crowd on this night, well, maybe there was, because I'll get to a live report later, but I don't think you could be disappointed in this match. I thought this was like a really high, very good. This was another, to me, it's one of the 3 big matches of the show, and I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I didn't have as many slow points as some of the other Morishima matches had. Like, his segment, like, I think he's getting less slow during that slowdown. Like, where you don't see as much of like the walking around. Like, he does do a chin lock. By the way, when he's like stands on Strong's chest and like kind of like stomps a little bit, how do you work a move like that, Trevor? Can you explain it to me?
I don't know, but I remember listening to Eric Stevens' podcast on his appearance on the Monumental Wrestling podcast that I brought up like a few shows ago. I remember one thing, they asked him about working Morishima, and Eric Stevens said like nothing in Morishima did hurt him except when he just does the move where he just sits on you. He says there's no way to work that, and that does hurt. So I would imagine, like
beyond it hurting, like how do you make sure that you don't cave in the person's chest or give them internal injury? It's like I feel like if someone the size of Morishima just like stood on me and kind of like hopped up and down, wouldn't you be worried about breaking your sternum?
Yeah, or even just moves sometimes you ever see in wrestling, like you're not with people with more show, but where they land like knees first on somebody. It's like, I know you can plan for it, but as rigid as I could make myself, like just holding in tightly, hold breath, whatever. I don't know if I could make myself that rigid that wouldn't feel like I'm at risk at cracking a rib or something.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's a small point, but I was just like, wow, how do they do that? But yeah, like what you said is totally true. It's interesting that they don't acknowledge at all that Strong is the FIP champion, since they had been acknowledging it.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like they're hot and cold with that stuff. Like sometimes it's important, sometimes it's not.
Maybe they don't want the optics of people going, well, why didn't Morishima win? Why wasn't this for the FIP title? Or like,
Yeah.
maybe they wanted to kind of hide that because they knew Murati was going to lose. I don't know, but
I
yeah,
mean,
that is.
I feel like a promotion like ROH, like they should just be like straight with everything, because like who
Yeah.
cares? But whatever. I agree with you about like the match though. I think like definitely kept at such a good pace, and Strong is a great matchup for Morishima. I guess you could possibly nitpick the fact that Strong sort of ignored his character during this match. Like, he argued with the crowd a little bit at the beginning, like before the match started, but once it got going, he was just like old Roderick Strong, just athletic, go, go, go. There was really no heel work, no stooging, none of that. He just took it to Morishima. And, as a result, it just was like a really good ROH style match where it was just two guys hitting each other hard. And like, I'll be honest, like as much as I like when a wrestler works in their character, this is still my favorite kind of wrestling. It's the kind where like just it feels like a serious match where two people are just very seriously trying to win a championship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean that's part of why I like ROH in the first place. That they'll do matches like this. And
You feel it feels physical, like even like on something like the spot Morshima's been starting to do regularly, where he does like the Ole running ass into the corner when he puts the opponent in a chair by the guardrail on the floor. Like I would say that guardrail moves like a good half a row based on how hard he hits that move.
yes, very much so. And
There's a lot of moments like that in the match where you're just like, wow, this is pretty damn physical.
yeah, and it was interesting to see Roderick work a match where he couldn't do any backbreakers.
Yeah.
Just shows how how talented he is at like his signature move, like he couldn't even do, and he still had lots of things to do, and it was still super exciting. So yeah, I thought this was really, really good. Maybe not quite dramatic enough for me to say hit the great level, but like if you want to say it's a great match, I'm not going to argue with you. Like I thought it was probably the third best match on the show, but take your pick. And when I say third best match on the show, I mean third best match on what we are reviewing right now, not counting Danielson against McGuinness. But yes, very good. And I think Morishima is getting better at doing these ROH style title matches as they go on.
Yeah, in fact, Dave would write on The Observer based on live reports. He said, Morishima has turned the corner in the last 6 weeks as far as the live crowds accepting him as champion. And although again, I think there were people online at that time still kind of going, but like, you look at this weekend, I bet you not everyone was super excited to see him against Claudio and him against Roddy compared to like some of the other matches. But like, I think if you were a fan watching either of those shows, you come away going, I'm really happy. Or it was Jay Briscoe the other night, not Claudio. It was Jay Briscoe. And but both those matches were very enjoyable. I like this better than the Jay Briscoe one, but like they're both enjoyable, fun, like worthy of being in main events. If not, they're not the like, oh my God, buy a DVD match of the year contender, but they're one and a half notches below that, which I'm perfectly happy with.
There are people to this day that say that like putting the belt on Morishima was a mistake, and I've never felt that way, and I still don't. So take that for what it's worth.
And so we end this DVD with Morishima quickly walking to the back after the match. No final backstage promos or angles, which is somewhat of a rarity for ROH in this era. And again, it leaves us with a DVD that ends at 2 hours and 19 minutes, which also makes our show a little bit less long because, Matt, we're now already going to go to who wins the Madoff Trophy because the show is over.
I've thought a lot about, like just giving it to Claudio because I really liked his performance, but who am I kidding? I think we're going to have to give it to the first time ever repeat back-to-back winner and Kevin Steen because man, I love that match and he was the star of the match and I loved everything that he did both athletically and personality-wise. I just can't say enough about how well he performed on this particular weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the last two episodes have basically been a love letter to him. Like, but he deserves it. You watch these two shows and tell me he is not just a fantastic performer on both nights. So yeah, that brings us to plug. Oh wait, we got to review the show,
yes.
Of course. I almost forgot. I got my brain. Anyway, Matt, what do you think of? Because this is an interesting show because I almost feel like we have to give two reviews because there's like how you would feel if you bought this DVD, but there's also how you would feel if you were a young Matt Feuerstein in the building and got to see what we saw, plus Nigel and Danielson, which I imagine that really adds a lot to the value proposition here.
Yeah, it's weird, like being like, live, it was like, this is a show that had one of the great matches of the 21st century on it, and like, obviously this DVD wasn't that. But it's still, I'd say, had two excellent tag team matches. A very good main event. Some dull, I would say, forgettable stuff in the middle. I would say this is still like a very B show. Like not a lot happened on it. And so in that sense, it's forgettable, but there was some real good wrestling on it. And again, if you were live in the building, man, it was a freaking fantastic show because it could not be when you add in Bryan Danielson against Nigel McGuinness. But as it stands, I would say definitely watch the Steen and Generico versus Quack and Jigsaw match. I think that most people would enjoy the last two matches as well, which makes it for a good show, but not like one of the most memorable ones we reviewed. Still definitely a B show.
Yeah, I think this is a good show. It gets there in a little bit of a weird way because, yeah, first off, we have the fact that I think if you add in Danielson, Nigel, this is unabashedly a great show. But almost no one today is going to, well, no one today, unless you want to make your own edit, is going to be able to watch it in that form. So watching it in this form, I think it's a good show, but it's kind of weird because it's a very have or have not show where I would say three matches, the top two and the Generico and Steen tag are all, to me, like 3 3/4 to 4, depending on my mood, like they're all really, really good matches. And then I would say everything else on the show, I would give like some variation of like 2 3/4 stars. It's very either it was like a little bit, it's a little bit better than average and kind of enjoyable, or man, that was really, really hit the spot. And so and it's also a shorter show. So at the time as a kid, that would have probably held me off as a teenager being like, oh man, I'm getting one less match for my money, but I still would have bought it because I bought every show and I was a weirdo. But, yeah, it's a good show, but in a way, this is one of the easier recommendations for, this is like the definition of a just watch 3 matches show. Like if you get this somewhere, if online for free, like, or, if it's, I don't know if it's on Honor Club or not, but if you do, really, you just have to watch the 2 tags and the main event, and you're going to have a great hour plus of wrestling, and you do not have to worry that you're missing anything else of worth. Not that those things are bad, but like this is a very easy, like prune the show and you'll have a much better experience show. And that brings us to plugs, through the years at gmail.com, ThROH, if you want to write us, at Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter. We're also on Blue Sky under similar names. Just search for them. And next time on the show, we will be covering the first half of the next double shot, United We Stand, which it's going to be a B show, but there's some intriguing matches on. We got Rocky Romero versus Kenta in a battle of the hard kickers. We've got Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness, arch enemies, teaming up to take on Morishima and Marufuji. That's an interesting tag. And then we've got a rematch of the match that stole the show at the first pay-per-view, Respect is Earned. The Briscoes versus Claudio and Matt Sydal in a 2 out of 3 falls match this time. I wonder what's going to happen there. And yeah, it should be an interesting B show to revisit. So until then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.